Chapter 7. Caro Kann Defense, Advance Variation. We will replay the main line and the important sublines, with pauses for tactics. Welcome back to our Caro Kann Defense series. In Chapter 6, Anand showed how white can meet early counterplay. Seirawan played c5 quickly, but Anand stabilized the center, took over the c-file, created a second front, and finally converted the endgame. Now we stay in 1992, but we flip the lesson. This time Seirawan has the black pieces against Nigel short in Amsterdam. The opening begins in the same family, advance Caro Kann, short setup, early c5. The difference is the handling of the tension. Short expands with b3 and g4, trying to push black's pieces back. Seirawan accepts the challenge, opens the h-file, castles queenside, hits with f5, and then simplifies into an endgame where black's central pawn and active pieces matter more than white's kingside pawn race. Your job in this lesson is to understand black's practical answer to the short variation, develop the bishop, hit the center early, provoke white's wing pawns, then use open files and a central passed pawn to turn defense into counterplay. e4, c6. Seirawan chooses the Caro Kann again. This is useful for our timeline. We just saw him lose with this opening against Anand, but strong opening players do not abandon a system after one game. They improve the details. d4, d5. Black challenges the center immediately. e5. Short chooses the advance variation. White takes space and asks the familiar question, can black attack the base of the pawn chain before white turns the space advantage into an attack? Bishop f5. Black develops the light-squared bishop before playing e6. This is still the Caro Kann signature. Black solves the bishop problem first, then builds the rest of the pawn structure around it. Knight f3. e6. White chooses the short setup. The knight comes to f3, white prepares b2 and castling, and the direct h4 attack is delayed. Bishop e2. Seirawan strikes in the center. This is the same early c5 idea from chapter 6. Black does not wait for white to build a perfect bind. Black attacks d4 while white is still arranging the pieces. Kingside castles. Knight c6. Both sides continue naturally. White gets the king safe. Black develops another attacker against d4. c3. C takes d4. Black clarifies the center. In many advanced Caro Kann games, black has to decide whether to keep tension or exchange. Here Seirawan exchanges and aims for piece activity against white's center. C takes d4. Knight on the g-file to e7. White recaptures and keeps the broad pawn center. Black develops the knight flexibly. From e7, the knight can go to f5, where it attacks d4 and h4, or it can support kingside and central breaks. b3. Short chooses a queenside development plan. The bishop on c1 will come to b2, pointing at the long diagonal. White wants calm pressure instead of an immediate h-pawn chase. Bishop e4. This is a very active bishop move. Black puts the bishop in the center of the board and makes white decide how to challenge it. The engine also treats black's position as completely playable here. White has space, but black has clear targets and active squares. Knight on the b file to d2. Knight f5. Black increases the pressure. The knight reaches f5, attacking d4 and h4. This is the Caro Kann counterargument in one move. White has space, but the space has weak points. Bishop b2. Bishop b4. Black develops with tempo and pressure. The bishop move pins down white's queenside development and adds another piece to the fight for d2 and c3. g4. Short decides to chase the knight. This is ambitious. White gains kingside space and asks the knight to move, but every pawn advance also leaves squares behind. In this lesson, watch how black later uses those open lines. Knight h4. Black jumps forward instead of retreating passively. The knight attacks f3 and g2, and it tempts white to exchange. Black is happy if the king side opens while white's center is still under pressure. Knight takes e4. D takes e4. White captures the advanced bishop. Black recaptures with the d-pawn and transforms the structure. The d5 pawn moves to e4, creating a strong advanced pawn that interferes with white's pieces. Knight takes h4. Queen takes h4. White removes the knight, but black's queen becomes active. This is the first concrete sign that white's pawn chase has a cost. Black's queen lands on h4, eyes h2 and g4, and helps prepare play on the h-file. Queen c2. h5. Short attacks e4. Seirawan answers on the wing. The h-pawn attacks g4, and if lines open near white's king, black's queen on h4 will be perfectly placed. Queen takes e4. H takes g4. White wins the e4 pawn. But black opens the h-file. This is a key practical exchange. Black gives up the advanced central pawn for open lines and attacking chances against white's king. Queen g2. Queenside castles. White steps away from the queen pressure. Black castles queenside. This is brave and logical. The king side is opening, so black puts the king on the other side and brings the rook toward the open h-file and central files. Bishop takes g4. King b8. White recovers the g4 pawn. Black improves king safety before starting the next wave. In sharp Caro Kann structures, this quiet king move is often what makes the attack sustainable. Rook on the f-file to d1. f5. Black strikes. This is one of the central lessons of the game. Black does not only attack on the h-file. Black also uses f5 to challenge white's bishop, support central control, and stop white from enjoying a stable kingside bind. Bishop f3. Knight e7. White retreats the bishop. Black brings the knight back toward active squares. The knight can go to d5, and black is ready to exchange pieces if the resulting structure favors the black rooks. d5. Short chooses activity. White creates a passed pawn and tries to open the center before black's attack grows. This is the right practical idea. When black castles queenside, white should look for central breaks. Knight takes d5. Black accepts the challenge. Seirawan removes the advanced pawn. The position is tactical, but the engine check confirms the practical story. Black is not worse if the exchanges lead to active rooks and a healthy central pawn majority. Bishop takes d5. Rook takes d5. White exchanges a bishop for the knight. Black recaptures with the rook, centralizing it. This rook on d5 is a major achievement. Black is no longer only defending the Caro Kann structure. Black has active heavy pieces. Rook takes d5. E takes d5. Short removes the active rook. Black recaptures with the e-pawn, and a new strategic picture appears. Black has a protected passed pawn on d5 and open lines for the remaining rook and queen. Rook d1. Queen e4. White occupies the open file. Black offers a queen trade. This is an important Caro Kann decision. When Black's structure and activity are favorable, exchanging queens can be the attacking move. It removes White's attacking chances and highlights Black's central passer. Queen takes e4. D takes e4. The queens come off. Now the game becomes an endgame lesson. Black has an advanced e-pawn, active pieces, and targets on White's king side. White has hopes against g7, but Black's counterplay is faster. Rook d7. King c8. White invades the 7th rank. Black calmly attacks the rook and keeps the king close to the action. This is not panic defense. Black is coordinating king, rook, and bishop. Rook takes g7. Rook d8. White wins the g-pawn. Black takes the open d-file. Notice the trade-off. White wins material on the wing, but Black activates the rook with tempo and supports the e-pawn. e6. e3. White pushes the passed pawn. Black answers with his own passer. This is the race that decides the lesson. White's e-pawn looks dangerous, but Black's rook and bishop are active enough to control it. F takes e3. Rook d1, check. White captures the pawn. Black's rook enters with check. The open d-file has paid off. Black's rook becomes active before White can organize the kingside pawns. King g2. Rook d2, check. Black keeps checking and driving the king. This is a practical endgame technique. Do not let White calmly consolidate. Keep the rook active and force the king into awkward squares. King f3. Rook takes b2. Black wins the bishop on b2. This is the tactical point behind the rook activity. White's long diagonal bishop looked impressive earlier, but after the center opened, it became loose. h4. Rook takes a2. White starts a kingside pawn race. Black takes the a-pawn and creates queenside counterplay. Both sides have passed pawn dreams now, but Black has the more active rook. h5. Rook h2. Black puts the rook behind the h-pawn. This is simple and strong. The rook belongs behind the dangerous passed pawn, where it can stop the pawn and attack it at the same time. Rook h7. Rook h4. White protects the h-pawn. Black keeps the rook active and attacks from the side. The h-pawn is not yet free to run. h6. a5. White advances. Black creates his own queenside passer. This is why Black did not need to panic. If White spends tempi pushing the h-pawn, Black can build counterplay on the other side. King e2. b6. White centralizes the king. Black supports the a-pawn and prepares to use the bishop and rook to stop White's pawns. King d3. King d8. Both kings move toward the center. In endgames from the Caro Kann, king activity often decides whether the solid structure becomes a win or only a draw. Rook h8, check. King e7. White checks. Black steps toward the h-pawn and keeps everything under control. h7. King f6. White's pawn reaches h7. This looks scary, but Black has calculated the race. The king attacks h7, and the bishop still controls important promotion squares. e7. Bishop takes e7. White makes one last try with the e-pawn. Black eliminates it. This is the turning point of the endgame. Once White's central passer disappears, the h-pawn can also be collected. Rook b8. Rook takes h7. Black wins the h-pawn. Now White's kingside hopes are gone. Black has neutralized both passed pawns and can play for the win with active pieces. Rook takes b6, check. King g5. White grabs b6. Black centralizes the king and prepares to support the remaining material advantage. Rook b7. King g6. The rook checks and attacks from behind, but Black's king is safe. Black keeps the bishop protected and avoids allowing White's rook to create perpetual activity. Rook b6, check. Bishop f6. Black blocks with the bishop. The bishop is not passive anymore. It controls the checking squares and helps the king escape. Rook a6. Rook e7. Black activates the rook. The rook goes behind White's queenside pawns and prepares to win them. Rook takes a5. Bishop g5. This game gives us the next black side lesson in the advanced Caro Kann timeline. Against the short variation, Black should not fear every wing pawn move. If White chases the bishop and knight with pawns, ask what lines are opening. Seirawan used the h-file, castled queenside, struck with f5, then welcomed queen trades because the endgame favored his structure and activity. So the chapter takeaway is simple: the Caro Kann is solid, but it is not passive. When White overextends to gain space, Black must be ready to open the right files, trade the right pieces, and let the endgame prove the point. As we saw in this lesson, the Caro Kann begins with c6 and d5. Black challenges the center, keeps the c8 bishop free, and later uses c5 to attack White's pawn chain. This first model game shows active piece play, central pressure, and a rook invasion.